Werewolf. In my swimming pool. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I've got a story about a werewolf from when I was a kid. That was before most of you guys were even born, I would imagine. I'm in my 70s and this happened when I was 10 or 11. Probably 11. I think this was 1963. Kennedy was still alive and nobody had yet heard of the Beatles. The whole world was about to change in a big way. But at that moment, it was still a whole lot like the 50s. You could still hear new doo-wop songs on the radio in 62 or 63. I'm not even making that up. It might sound crazy, but the story really starts the Halloween before. No, I didn't see a dogman that Halloween, but my brother and I saw a Disney movie on TV. A real Disney movie, hosted by Walt himself. It was called Sammy the Way Out Seal. Sammy was not way out by modern standards. He was just basically a seal. The main stars of the film were two young brothers around the age of me and my brother. And in the story, they somehow kidnapped this seal and snuck him home to live in their in-ground cement pond in the backyard. Me and my brother wanted two things from then on. A pet seal, of course, and an in-ground swimming pool. The first request would make our parents grouchy when we brought it up, but the idea about the pool only made our dad grouchy. Mom loved that idea. Dad worked in advertising and he thought maybe he could write it off as a business expense if he had a pool party and invited clients from work. When a neighbor down the block began digging up his yard to put in a pool that spring, Dad's keeping up with the Joneses' DNA kicked in. And bingo bango, we had our own backyard swimming pool by that next summer. Once the water was put in, we started to see a whole lot more wildlife than we had ever seen before. I saw birds come and land on things in the pool, and then they would drink the water. I don't remember if we used chlorine right away. I think that came a little later. I know the phenomenon of the animals gathering to drink like it was a watering hole only happened that first season. Maybe they just didn't know what in-ground pools were yet, I can't say. But I remember seeing birds. I saw a cat drinking the water one time. And I saw all manner of dogs and coyotes and whatever other kinds of canines we had roaming about in those days. This was a suburb of Milwaukee where my dad worked. But it was a recently built suburb plopped down in the middle of what used to be a woodland, with deer and coyote and some cats that looked like they could take you down, at least back when I was a kid. My dad told us and Mom to stay away from any cats we saw, that they only looked cute, but were actually deadly. He never gave us a similar warning about the large wild dogs that sometimes ran around alone and other times in small packs, like hyenas roaming the Serengeti. I don't know if hyenas really roam the Serengeti. I'm just trying to explain that even though we were as bougie as you could be, not all the local wildlife had yet gotten the memo that this was now an upscale Tony neighborhood. Sometimes people's pets would go missing, never to be seen again. And my brother and I would get excited. We were kids who were bored with the suburbs and the idea of the suburbs. We were to grow up to be loudmouth hippies, and we were already in search of a wilder and more authentic life than the one Mom had planned out for us. So when Fifi, the neighbor's cat, was suddenly gone, you realized you might be next. There might be a man-eating wildcat in the area, or a pack of wolves, maybe even a bear. My brother and I liked being scared. It was better than being bored. We would watch horror movies on TV as often as we were allowed to, and that was what we were into. Monsters. So one night that summer, after the pool had been filled, and my parents started planning parties, I looked out one of the back windows, and I could swear I saw someone swimming in the pool. I had invited a friend over earlier who never showed up, so I thought this might be them. It was getting dark though, so I went out back to tell my friend he had to go home and come back the next day. When I reached the pool, however, I saw it was a dog head coming out of the water. I laughed out loud. The dog was so big that I thought he was a person. To reiterate, while Dad had warned us about local wildcats, he had not technically warned us about the local canines. I loved dogs, so I clapped my hands and invited the dog to come over and play with me. The clapping sound seemed to both annoy and alarm this dog, who turned toward me with angry eyes. It looked like those eyes were lit from inside, like a demon's eyes. Suddenly my brother was at my side. He was saying something about how that wasn't Sammy, the way out seal. When that dog who wasn't Sammy saw the two of us standing there, he seemed to take it as some sort of personal insult. And then he did this thing that I'll never forget, even if I live past noon tomorrow. He stood up, like a man. He planted his feet on the bottom of the pool, and he stood up. Do you get me? Even my dad couldn't stand on the deep side of the pool and breathe air. I don't know how tall that meant this canine guy was, but it meant he was very tall. Me and my brother ran inside, screaming that there was a werewolf man in the pool. My father went out back annoyed, looking around. He came back even angrier, shouting at us kids, saying we splashed water all over the cement. The dogman had gone. He must have splashed water around when he ran off. The two of us got blamed for this. We weren't allowed to watch The Wonderful World of Color starring Walt Disney for an entire month. My dad was convinced that we only imagined seeing the werewolf in the pool, and that the idea had been put in our head by a movie that he now regarded as a bad influence on the two of us. Namely, Sammy the Way Out Seal. I didn't actually hear the legend of the dogman for many years after that. I think it was the 80s or 90s, really. But when people started talking about the real werewolves of the Midwest, my brother and I realized that was what we had seen that night when we were kids, swimming in the swimming pool. That troublemaking dogman got us sent to bed early. We couldn't watch Disney movies for a month because of the werewolf in my swimming pool. Don't go away, we've got a whole lot more dogman stories coming up, starting right now. Wolfman Vs Motorcycle. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I got a story that some of you might find a bit crazy, but I expect I'd say the same if you told me one of your secret stories. And this is a secret one. I haven't talked about this for years. I did confide in some people back closer to when this happened, but I hope they've forgotten about it. I'm going to keep this anonymous and hope none of them realize who this is writing to you. I'm about to tell you a true story that happened to me which has different effects on different people. I've had one guy tell me that my story proved to him that Dogman is not real. And I've had more than a few say the opposite, that what happened to me convinced them that Dogman is real. I don't know what a dogman is, even though this happened to me. Is it a wild animal? Is it a werewolf, or is it a sorcerer in a transformed appearance? Is it a skinwalker? If so, what exactly is a skinwalker? I guess I'm really wondering if it's real in the same way we are, or if it's something we might call paranormal, or supernatural, or possibly alien, depending on your worldview. Is it really from the same world we are? Or is it from somewhere else, and only a visitor here? Now, some of you may have already made up your minds that Dogman is just a bear with mange. There's a good reason for that, too. Some Dogman sightings may have actually been just that. Bears with mange tend to have a thinner and more canine look than healthy bears, and they really can appear like your classic Dogman if you see them standing or squatting on the side of the road at night. My story isn't about a sick animal seen squatting on the side of the road eating roadkill, though. The narrative I'm about to remember for you is about something that chased me for hours, and was able to keep pace more or less with my motorcycle. What natural animal can do that? None. Zero. There are some that could keep pace for short distances, but none that could run alongside or just behind you for that long a period of time. Besides that, my story has a trippy start. It really does. This is not your father's dogman story. It's your grandfather's, as I'm 72 years old now as of February 29th, 2024. Or 18 years old technically, since I was born on Leap Day in 1952. I only age 1 year for every 4 the rest of you age, but we Leap Day kids rarely live to have more than 20 birthdays. So I first saw the dogman or werewolf or brujo or whatever that being was in San Francisco. I was riding my motorcycle north on Broderick, and when I got to Greenwich, there was a big werewolf standing in the middle of the intersection, just standing there in the middle of the intersection. It was late at night and there was no traffic except me. So this monster, a really big tall man covered in fur, with a sort of a dog-like head, you know, a werewolf, and a big muscular one. Well, he was standing up on 2 legs like a man, and he was staring at me through animal eyes in the middle of the intersection. I say animal eyes because there was eye shine, and humans are not supposed to have that. This guy did. I remember thinking that I had a lot of driving still ahead of me that night, so I just drove around the werewolf and he just watched me do it. Next thing I knew, I was a few blocks north on the Golden Gate Bridge, driving north out of San Francisco in a deep and dense fog. And werewolves were the last thing on my mind. That's the way it was when I was a young man. I only cared about what was happening in that moment. These days, when I can do that, I consider it a moment of zen. In those days, it was just that I was usually very stoned all the time, and that can be a different doorway into the now than the kind Eckhart Tolle teaches. That's the kind of doorway into the now that incorporates instant memory loss once you're experiencing something new. I was like a human Cheech and Chong movie in those days. But this is not a story about that. In fact, I don't smoke any of that stuff in this story at all, so you don't have to worry about YouTube censor bots or anything. But being the guy that I was back then, it's probably a good explanation of why I just drove around the dogman at the intersection in San Francisco. It was not as crazy a time as now, but it was still a pretty crazy time. Now you dodge poop on the sidewalk. Back then you dodged werewolves at the intersection. I'm kidding, this was the only time I saw a werewolf in the city. I wasn't kidding about the poop on the sidewalk, but that's a topic for a different video. I have to briefly explain where I was riding my bike to for any of this to make sense. I was driving from San Francisco to where this young woman I was enamored of had invited me to vacation with her that weekend. Namely, I was driving north to Eureka, California, and the path I had chosen was the scenic Redwood Highway. I was driving at night to avoid traffic, and also because this particular young woman was very talented at making sourdough pancakes. Getting to her house by breakfast time was vital in my pancake-loving mind of that era. But mainly I was driving at night to avoid traffic, which was already legendary in California in those days. Johnny Carson would make jokes about it, and in those days jokes were still things that we all found funny, if you can believe it. So anyway, I know that some of you might find it hard to believe, but I had pretty much shrugged off the only cryptid sighting of my life and moved past it immediately. I rode over the Golden Gate Bridge and I continued riding free like Easy Rider for something like 3 hours after that, not seeing anything weird in all that time, right? Okay, then I passed a place called Cummings that always made me chuckle because I was a young man and young guys all chuckle when they pass Cummings. At least all young guys of my generation used to chuckle passing by over there. But anyway, it was somewhere between Cummings and Leggett that I saw the werewolf or dogman all over again. This time it wasn't even blocking the road. It was standing off the side of the road, partially behind a sign for Leggett, and sort of almost peeking out at me, although it wasn't really like he was really hiding, or trying to hide that much. I've looked for the sign that I remember on Google Maps, but I don't see it. I remember there was a grassy hill going up on my right, and I came around a curve, and there was the Wolfman, the same one as back in the city. He seemed to be waiting for me, and he had this disappointed kind of expression on his face, like he asked me for some cheese snacks and I said no. Do you know that face that a dog gets when it's disappointed in you? This dogman was giving me the disappointed dog look. And I'm telling you, this time I found him a lot creepier than I had the first time. Of course, by this time I'd been riding for 3 hours into the dark night up in the hills, with nothing between me and this Wolfman except air. Back in the city with electric lights all around, I didn't really think about it when there had been a werewolf blocking the intersection, but this was different. Now I was in the dark, in the country. Now I was on his turf. Now, for the first time, I wondered what that was, standing in the grass staring at me. Now for the first time I also wondered what I had seen back in San Francisco. And I was forced to wonder, was this really the same creature I had seen back in the city? Or was this an identical one? Identical what, though? Suddenly I noticed how cold it was. I don't know if it had been cold the entire way, or if it had suddenly become chilly, but I was shivering, and I wasn't having fun on my scenic ride any longer. I kept looking behind me to try to see that Wolfman creature, but it was soon out of sight. Not out of mind, though. Not this time. I kept feeling like he was going to come running up behind me, although the idea of that seemed insane. While I had my head turned around to the right looking behind, I felt a sudden hard pain on my left shoulder. I pulled the bike hard to the right and looked over to see what was going on. I found myself facing that Wolfman again, only now he was on the highway next to me, running as fast as my bike was going. The beast grinned at me, and I saw every one of his teeth in my face, in explicit detail. I smelled his breath at 50 miles an hour, and I nearly fainted dead away. If you faint on your bike going that speed, you will end up dead away. I gunned it, trying to gain speed on the creature, and I could have sworn I heard it laughing as it slowed down and allowed me to get away from it. How had he snuck up on my left like that? It didn't seem possible for him to have gotten that close before I even saw him. It didn't seem possible because it wasn't possible. I managed to hold it together and drive even though I was beginning to shiver violently all over. I think it was fear causing me to feel so cold. I don't think it really got that cold that quickly. I was not doing well, and I wanted to pull off the road and stop. But I didn't think that would warm me up, so I just kept going on and on and on. When I saw the monster again, standing on the side of the highway and grinning at me in the foggy night, I was already going as fast as I could make the bike go. I wanted to go faster, but I literally couldn't. I also didn't know how long I could keep my Honda doing what I had it doing. The next time I noticed the Beastman, he was back to chasing me. Once again, he was close to me before I saw him approaching. There wasn't anything I could do except keep pushing the bike to go further and to go faster. There wasn't anything in the world except pushing that bike and praying for safety and guidance. My entire life went into that prayer and that effort to go faster, and to evade that clearly intelligent nightmare of a wolfman, dogman, lougarou, rougarou monster, caveman thing, running on 2 legs as fast as my bike could go. No, he never dropped to all 4s when I was looking. He ran like he was a man in the Olympics, but taking strides longer than any man in history could ever think to stride. I looked at him and wondered how such a beast could be real, and how it could be doing the things I saw it doing. It was like a fever dream, But I was certainly not overheated in that moment. Quite the opposite, in fact. Do you understand why I think this was a man of some sort? That it might have been a being, an entity, a spirit, something other than just an animal that ran fast on two legs, as remarkable as that in itself is and was. This was an intelligence that had great power, and was capable of propelling itself insanely fast down a highway, apparently just to laugh at my reaction to seeing him do that. How was he able to get ahead of me over and over again? It was like something out of the Twilight Zone in a way, but also like something from an old Bob Clampett Bugs Bunny cartoon on the other. This was how absurd each of these scenarios was. But in that moment, the main thing I was praying for was company. Human company. I wish someone would drive up from the other side and that I wouldn't be the only human being in that entire area. And then, I got my wish. Headlights approached from the other side of the highway, and I saw them illuminate the road around me and me myself. And when that happened, I saw that there was no more werewolf chasing me. Immediately slowing myself back down to a safer speed, I continued my journey. But the creature was now gone. Well, until the light of the oncoming traffic was gone, and then I felt a tap on my shoulder. The dogman was right there, already somehow caught up with me. I began to wonder if he had gone and run in the woods parallel to the road when the traffic approached. But how could he have run a broken field course while I drove straight, and still caught up to me so easily? How he did it I still do not know, but the Wolfman entity would be there, running at speeds that it simply could not have been able to achieve and maintain. Sometimes it would be so close that it would tap on my shoulder to taunt and frighten me, but when any other traffic would drive by, I would not be able to see the monster any longer. I never once saw it approaching, and I never once saw it leave. It would either be there or it wouldn't be there. I'm not sure if it would run into the woods or what, because I never actually noticed when it would disappear. I was constantly focused on keeping my bike moving as fast as I could do under the hazardous foggy weather conditions. Oncoming traffic once again led to the dogman disappearing somewhere between Bellevue and Alton. But after that, it didn't reappear to me either that night or ever again. I suppose I should say never again so far, since I guess the Beastman might be looking outside my home even as I write this down, so many years later. I could see him later tonight for all I know, and if I did, I don't think I would know any better now what to do about it than I did back then when I was a young man. You know, I had a sense of great age and wisdom when that thing was chasing me, and that was possibly the scariest part of it to me. Why would something wise do something so Looney Tunes? I don't think this was a wise old man who learned how to cast spells or anything, but I do think it was a sorcerer. I think this was some kind of advanced kind of a human. That's what I think. Bear with me because this sounds crazy and weird, and I know that it does. But please hear me out before dismissing my ideas. I think some of the deepest knowledge there is gets buried in children's literature and forgotten otherwise. This way, when the knowledge is rediscovered, it can be ridiculed easily. Why, that's fairy tale nonsense from a Grimm's bedtime story for children. That can't be true. Like, the vision I had when that thing was keeping pace with me or disappearing at will was that it was something that was at once the same as our species and yet totally different too. The idea I had was like the witches in that old sitcom Bewitched, or the genies in that old sitcom I Dream of Jeannie. Ridiculous shows, I admit. Both of them are about races of people who don't just know magical spells or incantations, but who are a race apart from humans, who have innate inborn super psychic powers They can change their own appearance, and they can even change your appearance. It's played for laughs, and kids usually like both shows, but could both be hiding deeper underlying truths, probably without ever even meaning to. Now, I think the werewolves or dogmen are a species older than us. When I say that, I am not saying they are an undiscovered cryptid species of canines that run around upright. I am saying these are people who are so advanced compared to us that they understand how to change themselves into whatever they want to be, or at least into more things than we know how to be. Do they change at a molecular level? Do they only create the illusion of change to beings like us who have more limited ways of seeing the world? Does it even matter? If they can convince our senses that they are something, when does it start or stop mattering what they actually are? It's funny because I was remembering all this while watching one of your episodes, but it wasn't the Dogman story you were telling that reminded me of my own experience. It was your animated AI illustrations that look so real sometimes. It made me wonder if that dogman I ran with that night was some kind of AI. Like a living AI let loose in reality, able to change its appearance, able to seem to run any speed, or to appear and disappear as convenient. Maybe it was both there and not there. And maybe I got to see AI that night, decades before most people ever got to see it. At least that's my latest guess at trying to explain the night of Wolfman Vs Motorcycle. Let's all thank John Carnagon. He's a man that goes on and on. John Carnagon has been a member of our PayPal club at peterbernard.com for a long time, and we're very grateful to him for that. Because of his membership, he gets to see our secret, scary, members-only stories, of which we do 4 a month. Recently, John donated to us here on YouTube using our thanks button located under each of our YouTube videos, and that's the reason he's our executive producer tonight. Wolfman Jacked My Car. Dear Scary Stories NYC, back a few years ago, the government shut my business down while leaving big chain store versions of my store open. This stole my business from me, and eventually my wife left me with my kid, who I have not seen once since then. The two of them went off with my former best friend, so I had my family and my business and my savings and my friend all stolen from me. But this email I'm sending you isn't about any of that. Mostly. This email is mainly about how I got my car stolen from me by what I at first took to be a North American upright walking canid, or dogman. But a dogman doesn't know how to turn the ignition in a car, and this thing did. It had to have either been a man or a supernatural being, because an animal can't hit the gas and drive away with the last remaining thing you own. That's exactly what this guy did to me, though. So this happened out west in Nevada, and that is not a place I had ever heard had dogman in it. This must have been a native shaman or even a native spirit of some kind. Well, possibly it was, I don't really know. What had happened was that I had lost my business to the pandemic and my savings too. Then the house we were renting from my former best friend became an issue. It seemed that this friend of mine, who I had grown up with and who had been the best man at my wedding, decided I needed to get out of the house he was renting us. The stated reason? He disagreed with one of my tweets. This happened suddenly after dark. My wife got a text from our landlord, who was no longer my friend, telling her that she and the kid could come stay with him, but that we all had to vacate the house and I had to get out of his life. This was how I found out that my wife had been having an affair with my former best friend. It seems to me he was the bad guy in the situation, but he was acting superior over a political disagreement. He was acting like I was the one who did something wrong. This was insanity. I couldn't believe any of it was happening. I decided I had to go try to talk sense to my old friend. I didn't know what else to do. The one car we had left that we couldn't sell was no longer in good shape. I had to drive over to see my former friend and my wife's lover, who was our landlord, and try to talk him into calming down about all of this. To make me homeless over a tweet when we had been friends for decades. It was just shocking to me at the time. Not since. I've endured similar treatment from some others since then, but nothing like that had ever happened in America before. So I was unprepared to cope with that kind of thing. I got the old Pontiac convertible out on the road, and it sounded pretty sick that night. Sick in a bad way, I mean. I remembered that the engine sometimes conked out when you tried to idle, so I took a route which had fewer red lights and stop signs. It felt good to be alone that night because all the humans I knew seemed to have gone crazy. Some of them since then have apologized to me, but most of them are still crazy even as I write this email. I started to calm down driving alone, and I went over in my head what I was going to say once I got to my former friend's place, and I got him to look me in the eye, like back in the old days, and remember who I was. That was when I saw the creature. It looked like a man, but it looked like a bear. Except it wasn't either of those. It was something more like a werewolf or wolfman. The more I looked at it, the less I understood what I was looking at. Idiotically, I slowed the car down so I could get a better look. And the next thing I knew, the engine had chugged to a halt. And so had the car. That interesting-looking creature suddenly seemed more of a very large-looking creature, and it was suddenly quite interested in me. I tried to start the engine. I tried over and over and over and over again. The engine was dead like it had never functioned ever. Like it wasn't even an engine anymore. The monster man walked over closer to me on his hind legs. Well, I got a much better look at the beast man, but I can't really tell you what it is that I saw. It wasn't a bear, because the ears were all wrong. It also walked more gracefully than a bear does when it's up on its back legs. Bears sort of teeter-totter along when they're trying to walk upright. There are some that get good at it, but their legs are so short that they have no choice but to take short steps. This creature had longer hind legs than that. It ambled along, and it looked quite balanced and comfortable walking that way. Bears are meant to walk on all fours, but this looked like something meant to walk upright to me. Then it dropped to all fours and proved me wrong even as I was thinking the previous thought. Once down on all fours, I felt I was looking at a very large, oversized canine, but not a werewolf at all. The shading and coloring seemed different to me as well, different than it looked just seconds earlier. The creature lumbered over to the driver's side of the car, and I ducked down and slid over. It seemed to sort of climb its way back up to standing position, and then it looked inside the car at me, and I nearly vomited on myself. It wasn't a dog, and it wasn't a bear or a man. Its fur was dark again, and there was something with these radioactive eyes. It looked like it had a nuclear furnace burning behind those eyes. It was not a normal animal. It was either something sick or radiated or from the future, or maybe it was a spirit animal or brujo, like I was saying earlier. It was terrifying to see. It was a walking nightmare. The creature began shouting at me, like it was barking out orders. I don't know what it was saying, and I did want to understand. It might have just been animal noises, I don't know, but it sure sounded like some kind of language. Whatever the noise was, and whether it had meaning or not, the beastman kept repeating the same sounds over and over. A combination of shouts and growls that was nothing like English. I don't even know how to try to repeat it, even though I sometimes hear it in my nightmares. The werewolf man began to try to open the car door, which I realized was unlocked, so I quickly hit the door lock. It didn't go down all the way, but it went far enough that the creature man wasn't getting in just yet. I ducked down under the passenger seat and I prayed to God in heaven to save me. The creature shook the vehicle, and I finally got scared enough that he was going to tip it over that I ran out of the passenger side and off the road into the darkness to hide behind some scrub out there. I watched to see if the monster would follow me, but instead he finally succeeded in pulling the driver's seat door open. Then he hopped behind the wheel just the same as any human being would do it. I forget if he closed the door, but I remember my shock as he turned the key in the ignition. No animal would know how to do that. And what was even more surprising was that the ancient engine turned on the first try. That was how you know that monster was supernatural or paranormal. In either case, he hit the gas hard, and the car peeled out down the highway. That car hadn't been driven like that in half a century, and I expected the engine to fail immediately for him. Instead, that old vehicle was soon gone out of sight in a bad-smelling puff of smoke. So I had the choice of walking home where I knew my wife was packing to leave me and take our kid, or walking forward so I could at least tell off my former friend one final time. It was not a fun feeling in that moment. I did have tears in my eyes, but those dated back to the fear I felt, being just a few feet away from that hideous dogman monster werewolf creature. I walked on into the night, and the further I walked, the less any of it seemed to matter. I wasn't going to be able to keep the house, and I was going to lose my family as I had lost my business. They were to be taken from me, just as the car had been. Why was I walking forward? Well, why not? Whatever I had back at the house was going to be lost. It would be pointless to pack it. I had nowhere to move it. All I owned anymore was my wallet in my pocket, and the breath in my lungs, and the ability to keep walking forward, even if I had no reason left to do anything any longer. And then I saw it. The car, I mean. The front end was wrapped around a telephone pole like the car was made of tinfoil and painted. He must have been going at quite a speed to have gotten the fender to wrap around the pole in that way. I remember being quite impressed. No ordinary person could have survived that impact, but I didn't even see a bit of blood or anything in the front seat. Had he jumped out of the car before impact? It was possible, and so I looked back a ways on either side of the road. It was dark, and I had no flashlight or cell phone anymore by that point, so I didn't exactly do a very thorough job in my search. The longer I was in that spot looking for the insane Brujo Wolfman, the more I felt scared for my life. It occurred to me that if I was afraid of dying, that proved I still wanted to live. And if I want to live, I probably shouldn't be poking around in the dark looking for a monster werewolf dogman sorcerer who seemed to find it amusing to help my life fall apart faster. I went back to my car, and the trunk was partially open. I opened it up the rest of the way, grabbed a 24-inch tire iron to keep with me as a weapon, and I resumed my walk forward to the man who was stealing my family from me. Soon, I heard it. The beast. In the darkness just off the road behind me. It grunted and huffed, sometimes sounding almost like a horse, but other times more like a gorilla. I knew it was neither. It was an intelligent being in a horrific half-human, half-canine form, and it was amusing itself by following after me, keeping me moving forward. I made it to where my friend lived, with the beastman so close behind me that I could smell him. My friend, my former friend, he didn't see the monster behind me. He just saw me approaching him, looking like I'd just been carjacked and walked a mile and a half through the desert, carrying a 24-inch tire iron in one hand. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised when he did some kind of jiu-jitsu on me, or maybe it was kung fu, I don't even know. He handed me my ass, as they say, and I woke up in a jail cell. He beat me into unconsciousness, but I was arrested. They didn't even bring me to a jail hospital, just to the jail. How is that legal? It's not legal. But nothing like that matters if you've angered the gods, which I seemed to have done. I'm not even going to get into how bad it's been since then, but I am free again, trying to find work with a record attached to my name now. I'm training to be a plumber. It's an idea I got from South Park. Hope there might be hope for me yet, but it's hard to get too enthusiastic unless I can get a good luck streak going. And all the while this is going on, and I'm trying to build myself a new life. I keep thinking back to that werewolf that carjacked me that night. The more I think about it, the less random it seems to me. It makes me feel like all the forces of fate were aligned against me. It's like one of those Greek myths where Hera or Zeus curse a guy, and he loses everything. They just want some entertainment. What will the human do next? Or it's like a sadistic person playing The Sims, any version of The Sims. What happens if we take this guy's business from him? Then his family. Can't let him keep his old car, let's remove that too. Now let's get him arrested and sentenced to some jail time before releasing him alone to nobody and to nothing. What will he do next? While in stir, I read a book called The Four Agreements. And one of the four agreements is to never take anything personally. The book says that even if someone comes up and shoots you and tells you they mean it personally, you should still not take it personally. So I try not to take any of this personally, I really do, but I admit I am terrified. Because I know that Wolfman Brujo wizard was laughing at me being in jail when I hadn't even done anything. Now I have a record for violent behavior when I was the one who got attacked. And if that Wolfman wizard thinks that was funny, well, what else is he gonna do to me, just for the lulz? I don't know what made him choose me to target, and I don't know what he wants from me. Maybe it's just random, in which case the more I try to figure him out and appease him, the worse I'll probably make it for myself. Nothing has happened to me since getting out of stir, but I feel as though it would know if I got my hopes up that the curse was lifting. If I started to let myself feel better, I feel that the Brujo dogman would come back into my life in a way that would make its earlier appearances look like birthday parties in comparison. While I was in the second of a series of lockups over the tire iron non-incident, someone told me the biblical story of Job. God in that story acts a lot like a sadistic kid playing The Sims. He tells Job he has to kill his own son. Then at the last second he's like, "Just kidding, I'm a kidder. Funny, right, Job? You got a sense of humor, right, Job?" Yeah, the guy in my cell with me heard me tell my story to him, and then he was like, "You need to read the book of Job." When I was done, I asked the guy how that was supposed to make me feel better. He said it wasn't. It's supposed to remind me to be scared shitless of God. A lot of the Old Testament is just God reminding us that we better remember to be really afraid of Him. He tells us that He's light and that He's love, but then He reminds us that He's also the one who brings famine, and pestilence, and drought and ruin. He also likes to rub it in that we don't get to know why all this has to happen. We're just here to suffer for the amusement of something calling itself a higher power. It's like being stuck in that Greetings and Felicitations Trelane episode of Star Trek. I wish I could let go of my fear. I have nightmares about the Brujo dogman. I jump when I hear dogs bark out on the street at night. I felt safer in lockup than I do in my own home these days. I have no friends to talk things out with. I have to pull my head together on my own. But I'm starting to wonder if that's even gonna be possible. Last night I thought I saw the creature man again. I thought I saw him in an alley on the way home. But when I turned and looked, nothing was there. I might have imagined it because of stress. I might be making myself see things that aren't there. And that's just as damaging as an actual werewolf really stalking me. I can destroy myself more easily than anyone else can destroy me. I don't know what I've done wrong to deserve this. My behavior has never changed my entire life. I'm the same person I've always been. Yet suddenly my best friend and my family became my worst enemies. And some kind of supernatural monster tricked me into getting beaten up and thrown in prison. If I knew what I had done wrong, then I might be able to make amends. But I will never apologize for being who I am.
If you want a coloring book full of monstrous delight, then give this a look. It'll give you a fright, right? Scary stories, coloring book, werewolf coloring book. And just to make your mind explode, it's a digital download. All it costs is $2.09, and then you will be feeling fine. Coloring monsters today, day. It's a coloring book parade. Okay, link is in the description.
I don't want to sound condemning, but you'll never find a cooler cat than James Fleming. We love all our PayPal Club members and channel members, but one of the nicest we've ever had is James Fleming. He sends real emails from the heart, and I have a lot of respect for the guy. It's an honor to be supported by him, and we try to thank him in some ways. For instance, James gets to see our secret episodes, of which we do 4 per month. How to Train a Wolfman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm about to give you your best episode ever, and I'm going to do it for free. But someday, I might need a favor from you, and you'd better be ready to come through for me. I am a woman who has trained 3 different werewolves in my time. 2 for myself and 1 for a very rich client. And I'm going to explain how you can do what I've done. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you can train a werewolf. Well, it helps if you're a woman, because physical strength is not going to be on your side in either case. You're going to have to charm this beast, and we all know how charming women can be. But yes, even men can learn to train werewolves. First of all, I'm only talking about werewolves in terms of men who transform into the creatures. I'm better at training men than I am at training dogs. It seems to me that dogs think more independently than men do, but maybe that's only when they're around me. At any rate, I don't train dogmen, only werewolves. Now, I am not going to ever say that dogmen don't exist, because you can't prove a negative. Let's just say that every single dogman I've encountered in my life turned into a human male once he felt safe enough around me. I suspect that there may be no such thing as a dogman, and that in fact they're all werewolves looking to hide out from their mean girlfriends. Be nice to them, and they will quickly form a loyalty bond with you. So let's get started, shall we? The first order of business is getting a werewolf interested in you. You need him to be curious about you for some reason before you can lure him in. It doesn't have to be him falling in love with you from a distance, but that's what's always worked best for me so far. You can also give off a smell of meat. That worked for an ex-boyfriend of mine. Oh no, wait, he didn't rub himself in meat. He rubbed deer urine all over himself to make predators in the area think that he was prey. If you're a pretty young missy though, then some perfume might work better than deer pee, probably. In my experience, werewolves are hungrier for love than they are for deer meat. Again, if you happen to lure in a dogman and not a werewolf, and the dogman ends up causing despair and ruin, that's on you. I will deny having ever written you this letter. I'm only creating this email adding to send you this one letter, and I won't be remembering the password. If you're going to do any of this stuff, do it at your own risk. But you've got to get your scent in front of where they're sniffing, where they're never going to even know you exist. Like, you're not going to catch a wolfman hanging out in your apartment in a big city. You're going to have to meet the werewolf of your dreams and nightmares halfway. Chances are he lives near or in the woods, so you should too. You're going to need luck on your side. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's true. The first werewolf I met was purely by chance. I didn't even know werewolves were real, let alone that they could be trained like a horse or a seal. I shouldn't put it that way because it hurts the feelings of the werewolves when they hear me saying things like that. But wait, it's good to hurt their feelings. If you trample on what's most emotionally important to them and they still don't leave you, then you know that you're the alpha and he will soon be dancing to your tune. Of course, hurting his feelings on purpose can be dangerous. He might rip your throat open and leave you on the road to bleed out. Again, if that happens, that's not my responsibility. You're doing all this at your own risk. If you end up missing, with your body not being discovered for 119 years, this was all your choice. Okay, I hope that chased all the crybabies away. Now the rest of the way, it's only us left who are serious about having werewolves in our lives. and are serious about controlling the situation, too. Whether you are looking for a werewolf boyfriend or if you just want someone to commit robbery for you, get ready to satisfy some itches. I met my first werewolf when I was 18 years old and walking home from my friend's birthday party. I was walking alongside the edge of a wooded area, as I told you before. I noticed him following for 2 blocks before I said anything, but I had no idea he was a werewolf. I just thought he was an ordinary stalker or criminal. When I stopped walking and asked him to come out from behind the bushes and say hello, I have to say it was hard not to let him see how surprised I was, and how scared. While I was not consciously thinking I'm gonna subjugate this monster to my will, I did instinctively know that I couldn't let him know that I was in any way put off by him being there. And that's important to remember if you ever meet a werewolf. You have to act like you expected this to happen. You have to act like this sort of thing happens to you every day. Beyond being bored, you have to even be a little annoyed by it all. So let me tell you what I was seeing and smelling, and then I'll tell you how I reacted. You can overrule your fear instinct and decide how you will respond to threats. Here is how I did it. Okay, when I called the boy who had been following me out of the bushes and demanded he show himself, I was concerned about whether he'd be handsome or not. And I was concerned about whether he was armed or not, and of course whether he was psychotic. I wasn't really worried about whether he was human or not. But when I smelled that certain dogman smell, this became an immediate concern. Where I was hoping to smell aftershave, I smelled wet dog. Where I expected to see the head of a young man, I saw huge furry pectoral muscles. I had to look up from there to see the face, and it was the ugliest of monster faces in my opinion. Tyler, if you're listening, I apologize, but you made a bad first impression. When Tyler is the werewolf, he has a face that combines the worst parts of a human's face with the ugliest things about a dog's face. Thankfully, he's handsome as a man, but when he transforms, it's terrifying in more ways than one. So already I'm knowing this is not your ordinary guy. But I'm telling myself, stay calm. Act natural. Over and over again. I looked in this ugly monster's eyes and I saw that he was as scared as I was. Maybe he was more scared, because he wasn't able to hide it like I hope I was able to. I tried to make my mind bigger than the situation, you know? I saw that he was scared, so I wondered why would he be scared of me? I was half his size. He had to be scared of me because I was a pretty girl, and I was still dressed up walking home from my friend's birthday party. So he was attracted to me, and scared of the power that gave me. In his mind, I was the powerful one. But if I didn't act powerful, he was going to realize he'd made a mistake about me. What would he do then? Just walk away out of disinterest? Or would he get mad and make dinner out of me? It's hard to say what he might have done, but in that moment, I felt like this was an all-or-nothing situation. I was either going to get my fine ass dined on, or I was going to walk away from this situation with a powerful new 7.5-foot tall ally. I did what I'd been trained to do since puberty. I flirted. If you are a man, or if you're just not attractive, then you might not want to try that. You've got to have a reason to think this might succeed before diving in, since if you're guessing wrong, there could be terrible, and even tragic consequences. I think a good rule of thumb is, if you aren't sure, don't try it. Or maybe try the nervous and shy kind of anti-flirting, and see if he gets friendlier or more hostile. If you can tell he's into you, go for it full power like you've never turned on the charm before. For most of you, this will come naturally. If you aren't sure what turns a man on, though, just remember how your daddy told you to behave around men, and then do the opposite. Now, unless you live in Spain, you're going to want to get him to become a man again before you get too deep in the weeds with this flirtation stuff. I admit I have felt the hairy chest of a wolfman in my time, but I would never let one of them kiss me until he was human again. I'm uninterested in finding out what that might be like. It nauseates me to think of it. My older sister used to let her Great Dane lick her face. I would never allow such a thing. I spend far too long on my makeup to let a canine lick it and smear it. The werewolf form has its purposes and its advantages which you can harness, but in my opinion, it's important to keep sharp and hard boundaries in your relationship with a werewolf, or it's just going to get too complicated, and it might destroy both your lives. I'm not even joking. That is not hyperbole. It could literally wreck everything for both of you, so keep your rules in place. If you're a man, then you're going to have to find some other way to calm the beast down and get him to trust you. Maybe offer him red meat if you can afford it in this economy. Otherwise, maybe get your girlfriend to do this part for you. Some women I know get stuck at around this stage of the relationship. I call them the sensualists. Sensualists might do something stupid and fall in love with the guy. I'm going to give you ladies some important tips here, and this will be valuable for those of you controlling the lives of human men as well. The sex is not about pleasing yourself. The sex is about controlling the man. So you figure out what he likes, and then that's what you like. You make sure it's the best sex he ever had, and you tell him it's the best for you too. If you want to go have sex you actually enjoy, then go get some alley cat to cheat on your main man with. Sex with your main man is about getting him addicted to you. Once you've given him a bit of heaven, he's going to do anything you say to get more of that, understand? He'll steal for you. He'll break off with all his friends for you. He'll even kill for you if you say to do it, because he thinks you love him. So that's the most important thing of all, keeping him thinking you're deeply in love with him. As long as he thinks that, you are a very powerful woman. As long as you can keep in mind that your werewolf man is a tool to be used to accumulate more power for yourself, then you're on the right track. Even if he discovers that you've been cheating on him for years, if you've done this correctly, you'll gain power and allies in the time you've been running the relationship. You'll likely be better able to weather the storm of a messy breakup, and even take some of his friends away as trophies for yourself. That kind of leads me to another aspect of training a werewolf. Look at it as a long-term con, and expect it to eventually end. You can't keep secrets forever, and even if you haven't been cheating on your werewolf man, you probably don't really love him. He's probably going to figure it out eventually, and most likely in a way you hadn't anticipated. So have a parachute ready for when you're eventually going to need to bail out. Plant seeds early, and you'll have multiple vines to swing away on and find your next Tarzan to train. So what do I mean by that in literal terms? Well, if he has any werewolf friends, make them your friends too. Make them all wonder if your wolfman is really treating you right. Act like he abuses you. Make all guys wonder if they might be a better boyfriend for you. Never let his friends see your bitchy side. Make cupcakes when they come over. Cupcakes with cinnamon in them. Dogs will sit up and play nice for cinnamon cupcakes, you know. What works for dogs usually works well for almost all men. If you've planted enough seeds, and if you've watered them well, then by the time your werewolf man realizes how bad you've actually been treating him, you'll have multiple paths open to you for your next conquest. You can either choose the most viable werewolf, or you can choose the one who tries hardest to get to be with you. Personally, I always choose the most eager wolfman, not the biggest or most powerful. I feel confident that I can turn any eager enough werewolf into an alpha in his pack. I just get him addicted to my greed, and then he's a self-driving mechanism after that. At least for a while. Remember, ladies, even the best old-school watch requires you wind it up again on a regular basis. Even the most reliable man will need to be wound up again by you in order to keep him loyal, and keep him hopelessly in your thrall. My older sister's Gen Z daughter just read what I've written so far, and she says I've got so many rules. It sounds easier just to get a job and pay your own way in life. That is very true. Getting a job is easier than living a life of adventure. It's easier to be a rat and tunnel underground to live your life in shadows than to grab the werewolf by the horns, isn't it? I realize I just mixed metaphors up into a batter with that previous sentence, but I believe that makes my point. Some of us are not day job people. Some of us have to earn our living in other ways, like marrying rich, or marrying a man who you can manipulate into getting rich and then divorcing him. That's really the ultimate battle plan with werewolves. If you can find a rich one, good on you, but most of these men are tragic cases. They've usually lost their jobs, families, and reputations before you've met them. They can't hold down jobs. They live in desperate poverty, most of them, and some have even hurt or killed loved ones. Some of them hate themselves, and with understandable reasons. So when you take in a werewolf, you're in most cases taking in a damaged, hurt, feral beast. And that is why it's humane to train them, even if you have to get harsh in your training methods. There was one werewolf man who required that I get tough with him. He loved me even more than the others, but he had an independent streak that needed to be beaten out of him. I chained him by his ankles one night after I drugged him. He spent the next year in a cell in my basement. What I did was a federal crime, a felony. I kidnapped a man and imprisoned him against his will. But I did it for his own good. This took a weird and unexpected turn because we both discovered his transformations into the werewolf were far less severe in my basement. We don't really know if this is because he was blocked off from the direct moonlight, or if it had something to do with the kind of stone and concrete used in the basement construction, but he would not completely transform at night any longer. Now this made him actually like being in that cell, because his transformations had been quite traumatic for him before. He ended up agreeing with me for imprisoning him, which I believe is called the Stockholm Syndrome for whatever reason. He came to be in favor of his imprisonment, and together we worked on establishing guidelines for his eventual release. Now he's my sideman, my backup boyfriend. He cleans and cooks for me, and he works as a traitor male to trick other werewolves into being under my control. He went from being king of the woods to being my submissive assistant, and all I had to do was commit a series of federal felonies to make that happen. This truly is an age of great empowerment for women. And of course you guys can use deer piss and red meat. I'm sure those will work just as well as being a sexy and manipulative woman, for the most part. So I hope you like deer meat and rabbit meat, as in the early days of your relationship, this is likely to be mostly what you'll be gifted with. I knew one wolfman who also brought me some strange kind of berry that was edible, but usually it's going to be dead things, ladies. I'd advise acting like you're happy about this. He literally killed for you, and you'd better say thank you if you want him to do other more useful favors later on. Also, there are plenty of good recipes online for deer and rabbit meat. The internet is your friend, so use it. A special note to you well-meaning vegetarians out there: you can't make an omelet without cracking some eggs. If you are too squeamish to eat chicken, you're never going to be strong enough to break the soul of a man. Caring too much about the feelings of others is a weakness. If you've never been called a sociopath by any shrinks or ex-boyfriends, then I would advise against this kind of a lifestyle. You're never going to be in control of a man-eating supernatural cryptid monster by being a nice girl. Remember, ladies, werewolves eat nice girls for lunch. And now a song about our executive producer, Bench 600.
Bench 600, they are just so great. Executive producer of our show today. Bench 600 is all our top tier. Their donations make us smile from ear to ear. Bench 600 gets to see our secret stories. Here to explain more is our prophet in all his glory.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.